Hello, welcome to Everyday Tarot, your daily dive into the divine wisdom of the tarot. I'm your host, Camille A. Saunders, and today I'll be talking about reading tarot for other people. Whether you're a seasoned tarot reader or just starting to explore, this podcast offers daily insights, intuitive messages, and practical advice drawn from the cards. Each episode is designed to help you connect with your inner wisdom, find clarity in your decisions, and tap into the energy of the universe. Tune in every day, Monday through Friday, for fresh perspectives and empowering guidance from the tarot as interpreted by me. All right, so for our main discussion today, we're going to talk about reading for other people. So maybe you've been reading tarot cards for yourself for a while, or maybe you're just really interested in reading for others. You love the tarot, and maybe people know how into it you are. Maybe friends or family have started asking you to bring your tarot cards with you and read for them, but kind of where do you start? So let's start first with imposter syndrome. Right? So I know for me, right, if you go all the way back to my first couple episodes, I talk about getting my first tarot deck in around 2017, which is honestly just like not super long ago. I know 2017 feels like a long time ago, but I haven't even really been reading tarot cards for that long, at least compared to some other folks. So I know at first I definitely went through a bit of like, well, what do I know about tarot, right? Or oh, well, I read from the tarot deck book. And again, sort of this idea of like this gatekeeping idea of like, oh, well, I need to have all the cards memorized, or I need to have all these things in my head if I'm going to read for other people. What are they going to think if I'm like pulling out the tarot guidebook and just reading from it when I read for them? And I would just say, right, that if people, right, are into the tarot, they know how into it you are, and you really love it, like, I think it's totally fine to read for other people. I think I've mostly read for friends and family. I haven't done any paid tarot readings yet, although maybe that will become a part of availability on this podcast, which would be super cool. So maybe a little bit down the road, I can work on my own imposter syndrome around that. But yeah, I think like it's really common. It comes up of sort of like, well, what do I even know about tarot, or what are people going to get from me reading? And I would just say, sort of, yeah, maybe journal about it. Maybe you could pull some tarot cards about it, but start thinking about like, where does that imposter syndrome come from? Like, what do you think it means to be a tarot reader? Right? What have we been told in pop culture and media about psychics or tarot readers or reading for the future? Right? A lot of that can feel very scary, and a lot of folks, a lot of people in the world think of tarot as like devil worship, right? So there is this like part of it of like, do I really want to be labeled this way? But I think for yourself, you have to figure out like, what has tarot done for you? And if other people are sort of asking you for this, like, right, I don't think it really matters then, like how much practice you have or how long you've been doing tarot, as long as you're authentically yourself and you want to think about sort of like your own philosophy around tarot. So I would say that's kind of the next thing, is to think about being open about your philosophy about the tarot. And what do I mean by that? I mean, like, how do you read for yourself? What do you believe about tarot? Or like even just smaller things like, do you read reversals or upside down cards differently? Those type of things. And that can be something that when you go to read for other people, you like I would say be upfront about those things. Um, I know again when I do it, I'll sort of say like, hey, I'm gonna look in the book, or like, hey, you can read this too, or this is what it says. And then often I add my own sort of like knowledge or interpretation on top of that. But I really encourage folks that are having cards read for them of just like, take what take what you get from it. Like, maybe don't read too much into it, or don't be too freaked out about sort of the initial impression of the cards. But think about like, what does that mean for you? What's the message you're getting right now? So yeah, so how do you read tarot cards for others? I would say however you want to. I think some things to think about, right? Some things to keep in mind if you're going to do it are, I would try to cultivate the setting in which you do it so you and them are at ease. I like to do it in like a quieter place. I've done it in like a cafe or restaurant before for folks when that was actually the first time I did it was in a cafe with some folks around like a fireplace, which was super fun. Um, and yeah, that was just sort of like what happened. There weren't a ton of people in there, so it was still pretty quiet. But I definitely felt at first like, ooh, people are gonna be like people in this cafe are gonna be judging me, or they're gonna be like, who are these people over here doing tarot? Now I've definitely gotten over that, especially since I lead tarot meetups, like social meetups, and I've done them at restaurants and cafes and libraries and all sorts of things. So I feel a bit more comfortable with that. And often, honestly, people get really drawn in by tarot. I've had like waiters say like, "Oh, I read tarot. Like, it's so cool. I get to wait on you all today." Or just other people sort of have asked, even like, "Oh, will you read for me?" or stuff like that. So it can be a cool experience of just sort of putting yourself out there a bit more. So other things about the setting, like I think it's helpful to think about like ask your client or your friend or family, like, what do they know about tarot? Like, why do they want a reading today? Like, what interests them about it? Is it just that, maybe like me, you like post your tarot spreads or your pulls on Instagram, and so people know that you do it and they're sort of intrigued? I would say, try to have space to like a big table or the floor, like space to lay out your spread or your multiple cards that you pull. And just, again, whatever makes you feel comfortable. I think that that's helpful and also can put whoever you're pulling cards for at ease. And I would just, the other thing around sort of the setting, I would say give yourself time to go through and explain what you see the cards as meaning. I've definitely had situations where maybe I intended to give a tarot reading in a more casual setting, and we sort of ran out of time, or it was late at night, and I would just like honor what feels right to you, right? If you're gonna feel rushed, or if you don't feel like mentally there enough to do a reading or to really be mindful about it, then right, like schedule it for another time. Like usually people are happy, especially if they're friends and family and you're gonna see them again. Like usually they're happy to right do it at a time where it's gonna feel good to you. I think other things that are important are bring a deck that feels good to you and can match the person. So an example would be I have this Goddess of Love tarot deck that I love, but it has like a very sex magic vibe, very feminine. There's lots of like vulvas in the images and stuff like that. And it's maybe not the one I would bring like to any event. But for example, it was perfect to bring like for my friend's bachelorette party, where we were all together for a weekend and right there's sort of this love vibe and feminine and all that sort of stuff. Like it was perfect for then. For example, when my dad asked for a reading, I used my Anima Mundi deck because that felt a little bit more approachable. It has more like animals, nature on it, and there's a little bit less of like symbolic interpretation needed. I would say usually people already have like certain ideas about animals or nature or mountains and stuff like that, and sort of the vibe they give off. So that can be really helpful. Again, like for example, in the Anima Mundi deck, the King of Cups is the orca whale. I think I pulled it in an earlier podcast. And right, I would say like, yeah, orcas are often seen as like king of the ocean. They're big, they're very smart, and that sort of thing. So that can just really help like connect people like to what the tarot can mean with things they might already know. So that was really cool. And just, again, things to think about as you bring decks. Often, if I'm going to read for others or if I'm going to be around people who I know might ask, or even for myself, I'll bring maybe one or two decks with me, like a couple, so that when I read for myself or for others, like I can pick the one that feels good in that moment. Because I would say all my decks have very different um, art, certainly, but also like personality. So it can be nice to like pull the one that feels right in the moment. Okay, so right, you have a friend or family or a paid client that's wanting to ask you for a reading. They sit down and they're like, okay, what next? And you're like, oh, what next? So I would say you can have them ask a question. You can ask them if there's like a general topic that you'd like a reading about. which could be like, again, when I did one for my dad, he had recently like retired. So we just sort of did like, okay, on the theme of like retirement, like what's coming up. Sometimes people have, again, specific questions where they might want to like know an answer, or they're sort of like going back and forth between two things, right? Like, what do they want to know? What are they hoping for out of this tarot pull? And what sort of answers are they looking for? That might just be helpful for you to know as you go into it and how they might interpret it. So again, when you read for others, often like people want to have like the client's hands on the deck of the cards in some way. You don't have to, but I would say like some people you can have them like cut the decks and maybe you shuffle and then so like you let them take part of the deck and then you pull from the cards underneath. You can have people like clients or folks that you're reading for shuffle for you, or maybe do like the last shuffle or the first one, to just sort of like help, I would say, like impart their energy into the reading. I've seen some folks where they create, like they sort of deal out different piles, and then the client like chooses a pile, and those are your like 3 or 5 cards for the reading. So that way it gives like the other person sort of like buy-in and like they feel involved and also just feel like, okay, like this is about me. Maybe I'll do a different episode in the future about this, but I have had times where when I was around multiple people, I did feel like some of the cards were like not for me and were maybe about other people. So that can just be aware of that. And also just be aware that like everyone around you, especially if you're in like a public setting, like might not be into tarot or might not want to know whatever comes up. So, right, make this consensual. And if you have cards that you feel like are about other people or like not for you, maybe just like set them aside, and you can kind of decide what what you do with that information. Because people can get, I would say, very maybe freaked out's too strong of a word, but like activated um, around like future fortune telling, like things like that. Can be kind of scary for some folks. So again, make this a consensual process, please. All right. So now we're into the like interpretation side, right? Okay. So your client or whoever, they've got the deck or shuffled, they've picked their pile, and now you flip over the cards, right? Like the first thing I like to do is like sort of see like what reactions people have to the cards. Like, did they wince when you pull the card? Or was there a card that they like don't like? What stands out to them? Like what's the vibe? And I think it can be nice to get like their viewpoint on the cards and just sort of what they see before you start to kind of interpret and sort of put your own ideas or like bias like into their head about like what the cards are. I like to be really open about how I interpret the cards. Like I'll say like I'm gonna look in the book and I'm gonna read what's in there. Like you can read it. I say for reversals, I often read or explain the upright version first, and then I'll offer what I think the reversal might mean, or sort of like what it might say in the book about that reversal or the challenge. Um, yeah, and then you can just kind of like see how that goes. I guess another thing that I do is often I'll like lay out the cards facing me when I lay them down, but then I might turn them the other way if the person sitting across from me so that they can see them like in the same way I did. You can deal them to the person like facing them. It just might be harder for you to like look at and interpret it. And you can always move them like that. So yeah, for like insights, like again, I'd be asking them like, what did you get from the reading? Like, are there, this would maybe be towards like the end, but like what, again, what's the vibe? Like, is there anything that, were they asking a question and now they feel like they know the answer, or are they making any changes in their life? Usually people I would say are pretty like open about that, like they'll divulge that information to you, sometimes whether you want it or not, about like, oh, okay, like now I really think like this is what I'm gonna do, or just sort of that kind of thing. For some people, it might like take a while. I did a reading for someone at my friend's bachelorette party, and she told me later, like, oh, that was like really like life changing and super helpful. but they sort of needed some time to like process and like think about like, okay, like maybe I'm feeling encouraged to do this thing that's big and scary. Like, okay, like I'm guessing I'm gonna do it, that kind of thing. And then yeah, also again, like usually when I read for other folks, I I encourage them like, hey, like, do you want to take a picture of the cards or any of like the sections in the tarot guidebook? That like I may have read to them. I mean, people can always take notes or anything that might be helpful, but just so that they can reference it later. I think people often like to see the picture, which is part of why I put all the tarot cards that I pull on my website so that you can see them because, right, I can describe it and you can maybe even know the type of card it is, but seeing the image, especially since most tarot decks are so different, can be really like helpful to just solidify like what folks take from it and just help them remember it in the future or right if they get into tarot. Sometimes it can be helpful because they might look back and be like, oh, okay, I pull that card all the time, or like I'm still doing that. Again, that's the thing I hope to talk about in a future podcast. What happens when you pull the same card all the time? But yeah, just allowing people to have that reference too, because sometimes, right, if you're in this sort of like intense like reading or like this, I don't know, like thought download or like things that are coming up for the person as you're doing it for them, they might have certain like insights or anything in the moment, but they might also have them like later, like days, hours, days, weeks later, months even, that might come to them or they might realize like, oh, okay, like I think that's what it was about. Um, okay, so I'm gonna sort of wrap up there. It feels like a good amount of stuff that we talked about for how to read for others. If you want, again, some book ideas to maybe like expand your readings, maybe you're, again, sort of like doing this now and you want to get into it more regularly. Two of the books I have that I like that are sort of in this avenue is Fearless Tarot by Elliot Adam. The subtitle is How to Give a Positive Reading in Any Situation. So that one's super cool. And then I also have 21 Ways to Read a Tarot Card by Mary Kay Greer, which again is a pretty thick book, lots of different sections, but just can kind of, again, if you've been reading tarot for a while and you're getting into reading tarot cards for others, like it just might help you get some different ideas about how to read different tarot cards or just sort of like different ways of going about it. All right, so let's dive in and see what the cards have to say today. All right, so today I'm going to pull from the Anima Mundi Tarot deck by Megan Weirer Linden, which again, links for that will be up on my website, and you can see the card there that I pulled. So I sort of asked, like, what do I need to know about pulling cards for other folks, or what can we learn from when we pull cards for other people or start to do that? So I pulled the Queen of Cups reversed, which is kind of funny because I was talking about the King of Cups earlier. That's the orca whale. And the Queen of Cups in this deck is a humpback whale. And I'm going to read the upright version first, and then we'll sort of see what like the reversal might mean. So it says the Queen of Cups is a warm-hearted and emotionally secure figure who is intuitively in tune with the emotions of others. She welcomes all with open arms and provides guidance and emotional support. Be empathetic and supportive of those around you. So upright, the themes are compassion, calm, nurturing, and intuition. So as this card's reversed in this particular deck, in this guidebook, it does have some notes for the reversal. It says emotional insecurity, coldness, dependence, bottled up feelings. So sort of since I asked about reading for other folks, and this is this sort of like reversal is just sort of interesting because upright it talked about being in tune with emotions of others and being open-minded and guidance and emotional support. So I'm sort of sensing that like right? Like that's maybe where we want to be. We want to be open, providing guidance for people, emotional support, right? That sounds like a great tarot reading. Like if you were a reader, like empathetic, supportive of those around you, right? That sounds pretty ideal. But just right now, we might be feeling a little like, ooh, but how do I get there? How do I, right? Maybe feel that, like let go of that imposter syndrome. How do I tune into what others are thinking and feeling right now when maybe that feels a little scary, or just sort of like getting caught up in other people's emotions might be challenging. And that can be a part of reading for other people. Is sort of like after, like, do you like cleanse your cards? How do you sort of like separate yourself from after you like tune in to sort of what that other person might need or what the tarot is telling them, and just how do you like sort of close that or wrap that up. So I'm going to make a note because that would be an interesting topic for the future as well, of sort of like things that might happen when you read for others, and sort of how do you protect your own energy, or how do you make sure that when you leave that situation, you're not like taking um, all that person's like emotions or readings like with you when you go back to sort of like your own day-to-day life. Um, which, yeah, again, as a therapist, like it's definitely a thing we talk about in therapy too, of like being a therapist, like how do you, right when it's the end of the day and you've been seeing clients all day, like how do you uh, get back to yourself and sort of like let go of other people's energy or emotions or things that came up during your sessions, and sort of find like yourself again. Um, all right. So yeah, that's it for today. So thanks for joining me on Everyday Tarot. Just as a reminder, the podcast will come out daily, Monday through Friday for all of 2025. All right. See you soon. Bye bye.